Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Jai
Jaya
Shri
Shri
Chaitanya
Chaitanya Jaya
Jai Nityananda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai
Jaya
Advaita
Dvaita
Chandra
Chandra
Jai
Jaya
Gaur
Gaura
Bhakta
Bhakta.
We are continuing our reading and studying of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. We're at Adi Leela, chapter 7, text number 107. The title of the chapter is Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features.
ভ্রম প্রমাদ বিপ্রলিপ্সা করোনা পাটব ঈশ্বরের বাক্যে নাহি দোষ এইসব।
Translation: The material defects of mistakes, illusions, cheating, and sensory inefficiency do not exist in the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: A mistake is the acceptance of an object to be different than what it is, or the acceptance of false knowledge. For example, one may see a rope in the dark and think it to be a serpent, or one may see a glittering oyster shell and think it to be gold. These are mistakes. Similarly, an illusion is a misunderstanding which arises from inattention while hearing. And cheating is the transmission of such defective knowledge to others. Materialistic scientists and philosophers generally use such words as maybe and perhaps because they do not have actual knowledge of complete facts. Therefore, their instructing others is an example of cheating. The final defect of the materialistic person is his inefficient senses. Although our eyes, for example, have the power to see, they cannot see that which is situated at a distance. Nor can they see the eyelid, which is the object nearest to the eye. To our untrained eyes, the sun appears to be just like a plate. And to the eyes of one who is suffering from jaundice, everything appears to be yellow. Therefore, we cannot rely on the knowledge acquired from such imperfect eyes. The ears are equally imperfect. We cannot hear a sound vibrated a long distance away unless we put a telephone to our ear. Similarly, if we analyze all our senses in this way, we will find them all to be imperfect. Therefore, it is useless to acquire knowledge through the senses. The Vedic process is to hear from authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo vidu. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of the cyclic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 2nd verse. We have to hear not from a telephone, but from an authorized person, for it is he who has real knowledge. Om Agyana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtang Stapitang Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Katamaikam Dadati Sha Pandantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here is making a very significant point about how to acquire knowledge. Or when we talk about knowledge, we're talking about information or understanding that's reliable, that you can bank on, that doesn't change over time or according to place or circumstance or culture. So that knowledge he's talking about, and that the title of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you know what it is called? 4th chapter? Anybody?
Transcendental Knowledge.
Yes, thank you. Dronacharya Prabhu. So there's all different kinds of knowledge you can get. You can get knowledge of, the stock exchange or the periodic table of elements. But transcendental knowledge that will help us understand who we are, how this world came about, what is time, etc., who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. There's a process to get that knowledge. And it begins, like it's mentioned here, evam parampara praptam imam raja sheo vidu. That knowledge is coming down in a descending process, in disciplic succession, from the Lord himself. The idea of, or the study of how we get knowledge is called, you know what that's called? Anybody? Sometimes it's called epistemology. How do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? So in the Vedas, Lord Chaitanya is citing this Vedic version that there are problems getting knowledge by ordinary means through the senses. Why is that? Well, there are 4 prevalent, very, very frequent, very common defects that affect that kind of knowledge, and we should know those 4 defects. See, without going back up, who can name the 4 defects of material knowledge? Or go ahead.
One have imperfect senses, one commit mistake, tendency to cheat.
Yes.
One is illusion.
Yes. So those are 4 defects that infect knowledge on the mundane plane. So if we want perfect knowledge, reliable knowledge, accurate knowledge, then it has to come from a perfect source. You follow? And the perfect source, that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the knowledge that comes in parampara should be the same knowledge that's coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, handed down unchanged, without any additions or subtractions or manufacturings to us today. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada would describe the acharya or the guru as they use this perhaps in India, this phrase, post peon. Have you heard that? Post peon. We call it a post male person. They call it a post peon. So they getting the information from Krishna and they're just delivering it, not changing. Now if the post peon or the mailman or male person opens the letter and then change something, then closes it and gives it to you, what would happen? Trouble, right? Very big trouble. That person would be in trouble. And we wouldn't get very good. We would get a messed up message. So this information should be transmitted just like a mail person will deliver the mail from the source. Srila Prabhupada also gives the example, like if you want to get, a nice fruit from the top of a tree. I know that in my backyard growing up, we had an apple tree, and they had there were golden delicious apples, very nice round golden delicious, very sweet, especially in the summertime, late in summer. But there was a trouble because the nicest ones were right at the top of the tree, and we couldn't get up to the top of the tree. So how would we get those apples? We'd try to we'd throw other apples and try to knock them off, and he'd hit it, but then it would be bruised, and it wouldn't be so nice when it hit the ground. But in India, apparently, when they want to go, or probably in the United States too, other countries, when you want to get a nice fruit and make sure it's whole and not damaged, people climb up the tree and they can go all the way to the top, and they can pick that nicest fruit there and then hand it down to people in the tree one after another very carefully, so it comes to us. That's called parampara. Not changing, not bruising the knowledge, not adding to it, but giving it to it just as it is. Of course, most people think that seeing is believing. Unless you can see it with your own eyes, then I don't believe it. In the realm of law, it's well known that eyewitness testimony, that is seeing with your own eyes, is not very reliable. Many people falsely identify a person, even though they're witness, as somebody else. Very, very common. It's well known in the legal field. In psychology, they did an experiment where, like we're saying, seeing is believing. They did an experiment where at a small town where there were many, many football fans, many people in the town went to a high school football game on a Friday night. And during the game, it just so happened that one of the star players during the got hit hard and got knocked out, and the ambulance came and they had to take him away. So a few days later, the researchers invited people from the town to their office, and on the table in the waiting room they had a article on the front page of the local newspaper, falsely printed. They printed it themselves. It wasn't the real news. And it said that, during the football game, such and such person was injured and there was blood everywhere, blood all over. And it was a very scary thing. Okay. So then they would call the people in after they'd waited in the waiting room for some time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and they'd interview them. 95% of the people, when asked what they've witnessed in the football game, they said, what do you think they said?
Was badly injured and there was blood everywhere.
That's right. There was blood. There was blood. So they were witnesses, but they swore to it. They swore to it that there was blood. Another experiment in the social psychology they give us. They brought people into a waiting room. These are very interesting, in a waiting room. And then for some of the people, while they were waiting in the waiting room, they rang a bell very loudly. And then they brought him in and they asked him what they heard. And they said, oh, we heard a bell, of course. And other people, they didn't ring a bell, but they hypnotized them to say that to think they heard a bell. And when they were asked, they also said, oh, what did you hear when you were in the waiting room? We heard a bell, even though there was no bell. So then over time, what happened was they kept asking him, oh, remember you came in last week and you were waiting in the waiting room and you heard, what did you hear? And then, so over time, the people who actually heard the bell, they became less confident that they had actually heard the bell. Whereas the people who were hypnotized to think they heard the bell, they were much more sure they heard the bell than the other people over time, which is very interesting. And then another experiment they did was, these are all socio-psychology experiments, but we're illustrating the point of imperfect senses and how it's, not necessarily reliable knowledge. They brought up, they had a bunch of people in a classroom, say 20, 25 people in a classroom. And a teacher stood in front, and on the blackboard, usually in the classroom, there's a blackboard or a green board. The teacher made 3 lines on the blackboard. The first line was very long, and the last 2 were right next to it, one right next to it, right after another, they were very short. So a long line and 2 short lines. So in the class, they said, well, we're doing some discussion and check on perception. And we'd like you to tell us which is the longest line. So the teacher would call on different people. So they called the people in the front row and the side row, and all of them said, you know what they said? It's the last line. Which line was the actual longest one? The first line, yeah. But these people were all in on it. They were in on the research. So everybody was one after another. They were saying it's the first, it's the last line, it's the last line. Then they got to the person who was the actual subject of the experiment. And what did that person say almost all the time? Not 100%, but almost all the time.
The last line.
The last line. The last line. So this is like, in this world, most people say there is no soul. So what is the next person going to say? There is no soul. That's the way it is. The last line is longest. So these things are all you can demonstrate these things without difficulty. That the senses are imperfect, that we become illusioned, that we make mistakes, and we cheat. Do you know any examples of mistakes that Srila Prabhupada would sometimes quote in his writings?
The rope and the snake. At night we saw a rope, we think that it is a snake.
That's mentioned here, yes, yes. Any other one? Well, Srila Prabhupada noted that, John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, he said he was warned not to go to Dallas, where he was assassinated in 1963. And, for in the whole country, who's got more security than the President of the United States? So he was warned, don't please, there's people who are going to plan, who are plotting your demise, don't go to Dallas. And but he went anyway, and he got shot. That was a mistake. And similarly, Mohandas Gandhi was warned, don't go to Delhi, don't do that. And he also disregarded. So even very, very highly elevated or well-supported people, we make mistakes. And of course, all of us make so many mistakes. Nobody gets a perfect score on all of their tests in school, do you? Maybe somebody did, I didn't. So many mistakes are there. Illusion. Our main illusion is we think that we're the physical body, and that enjoying the physical senses is the really important thing in life, either our senses or the senses of our family members, friends, country, all that. So these things infect knowledge, and therefore they disqualify regular people like you and me from transmitting accurate information. So the solution to that, as Lord Chaitanya mentioned, discussed when he was in his discussion with Ramananda Roy, and Ramananda Roy was asked by Lord Chaitanya in South India, not far from Vishakhapatnam, not far from Vishakhapatnam, on the bank of the Godavari. Lord Chaitanya said, what is the process of knowledge? What is the purpose of life, and how do you attain it? So Ramananda Roy said, well, you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're telling me, you should tell me. And Lord Chaitanya said, no. Kiba vipra kibinashi shudra kenenoy jay Krishna tattva veta se guru hoy. Anybody who knows the science of Krishna, you are a guru. So you be the teacher. And he said, Ramananda Roy said, you're just playing me like an instrument, but I will follow. So then Ramananda Roy gave all kinds of quotes from the scriptures about what was the process of acquiring knowledge and acquiring devotion to reach the goal of life. And Lord Chaitanya, one after another, rejected them. Then finally, well, Ramananda Roy said, stay in your position. Stani stita shrutigatam tanu vagmano bhi. You just stay in your position and you hear from spiritual authorities about the personality of Godhead. And Lord Chaitanya said, yes, that is the beginning. That is the beginning, yes. So the same point is being reinforced here. So that's one of the reasons why Srila Prabhupada emphasized having regular Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam classes to reinforce this important point, to reinforce and solidify our knowledge about who we are and who is God and what our important activities in life are. So we have these classes, and you're so kindly participating in the classes for everyone's benefit. Comments, questions, additions?
I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this class. I'm sorry about the interruption. I've spoken to devotees who, I don't have personal experience of this, but I have spoken with devotees who claim that certain hallucinogenic drug experiences that they had led them to Krishna. They provided some kind of, out-of-body experience, and that got them thinking and exploring more the nature of the soul, and that really it was the impact of these, illicit drug experiences that led them to Krishna. Have you ever heard this, or would you mind commenting on that?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
There is Allen Ginsberg, who was a very famous beat poet in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. He was one of the pioneers, along with Timothy Leary, of LSD exploration. So, but he also had some idea that it was something spiritual. So he went to a guru in India, and he said, in Kali Yuga, you need a really fast method, a really quick method, because people are not so interested in spiritual life. And that fast method is?
LSD.
LSD, yeah. Timothy Leary had a similar philosophy among a bunch of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and apparently the guru said, Yeah. That sounds good. And he told this story to Srila Prabhupada in Columbus, Ohio, when they had the big meeting there in Columbus, when all the students in the auditorium got up and danced to the chanting Hare Krishna, 1969. So Srila Prabhupada's response to Allen Ginsberg was, well, yes, you're right. That's correct. You do need a fast way to become Krishna conscious, to know God. But it's not LSD. It's chanting Hare Krishna. That was his response. So, people have different experiences on LSD. They may, some people become completely mad on LSD. You'll find that there's many millions of people took LSD, but how many became Hare Krishna devotees or became spiritually inclined?
Yeah.
How many? Very, very, very few. Very, very few. So that might have given them a shake up, just like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 4 kinds of pious people come to me. The Arto Jigyasa or Artarti Gyanicha. So they might have given them a slight hint of some knowledge or slight hint of some unhappiness, but without getting the transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, that wouldn't have helped them all. There was a king or a very rich person who went to he was very attached to a prostitute by the name of Chintamani. So on the funeral day of his father, he decided, well, he left the funeral very quickly and decided he had to see the prostitute. It was raining. He was raining, and he had to cross a river. And the river, in the middle of the river, he grabbed something. He was going underwater. He grabbed something to help him, save him, and it was a dead body. He got to the wall of the prostitute's house, and climbing the wall, he grabbed a snake, and finally he got over, and he ran, and he knocked on her door. Finally, she said, she answers the door, and she said, if you had so much attraction for Krishna as you did for this body, then you might have been, your life might be useful. So that person, that he became Bilva Mangala Thakur, a great devotee. He took her statement as knowledge. He accepted her as his Vartma Pradarshika Guru. There's different kinds of guru. Vartma Pradarshika Guru means someone who shows you the path. Someone who shows you the path. So he took Chintamani. He praises Chintamani. Not that we accept everything of what Chintamani did as a spiritual. You follow? Just like, so whatever might bring us to Krishna consciousness, that's very nice. But the main important ingredient is the teachings from the Parampara, the spiritual master. Without that, the LSD experience is not going to be of any value. So sure, it could happen. It could happen. But if you keep on taking LSD, then you're in trouble. I don't know if that's of any use, that answer. Other people might want to comment on that. What do you think? That sounds like Mother Sundari.
Prabhupada told, I agree, but you don't need LSD. Your spiritual life is here.
Yes. Yes. I see Bob has his hand up.
Oh, Bob.
Hare Krishna. I will say on the flip side, maybe I'm odd on this one, but it took me like 2 years of getting clean until I could come to Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
So it took that time to get all the things that I put my body out of it to actually come to Krishna consciousness with a clean mind and be able to understand it. So I think if I would have tried before, I wouldn't have gotten it at that point.
Good point. That's usually the way. That's usually the way it happens. Usually, when a person is, when we're involved in intoxication, it's very difficult to make progress in spiritual life. There may be some exceptions. And and it might come through LSD. It might come through alcohol. It might come through marijuana, but usually not. Usually not.
In the Alcoholics Anonymous group, they teach people to rely on God to overcome their
Yes.
alcoholic problem.
Yes. So as a way out of the dependence on alcohol, you have to depend on something. Sure. Good point. Thank you.
Can I mention about assassinations? The fact that Prabhupada told, from time to time, he told people about John F. Kennedy's assassination, how cruel the laws of nature are. You know, he would
Yes.
make the point, you don't know when death is coming. And you mentioned Gandhi's assassination also. When I was reading what Srila Prabhupada said to John Lennon and George Harrison, the first time that he spoke with them, he also mentioned Kennedy's assassination. And the reason I'm telling you this is that it turned out that the laws of nature were also very cruel. In the case of John Lennon's death, he was assassinated by one of his so-called fans. He was just walking into his building where he lived in New York. And the fan killed him, I guess, for the sake of name and fame or something.
Yes. So, in Srila Prabhupada's words to John Lennon were prophetic, and you're saying, yes,
In a
very
sense,
apt.
yeah, in a sense, it was. Anyway, it was ironic, at least. You know, John Lennon didn't want to be assassinated, but it happened to him.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can happen to anyone. Padam yadvi padam natesham. So if somebody warns you that you might be assassinated, you might take it seriously.
It seems that big people get assassinated.
Yes.
Lincoln got assassinated.
Of course, Maharaj Pariksit became assassinated too. But he knew of it ahead of time, and he took the proper steps to to address the situation by sitting down on the bank of Jamuna and focusing his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari. Shukadev Goswami answered Pariksit Maharaj's question. What is the duty of someone who's living, especially someone who's about to die, like me? And then Shukadev Goswami answered very, very elaborately, initially just with a simple few phrases, and then the whole Srimad Bhagavatam to prepare him for his going back to Godhead. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Shall we read one more verse? This next verse is, let's see, it's text 108. It's a long one.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay.
উপনিষদ সহিত সূত্র কহে যেই তত্ত্ব মুখ্য বৃত্তে সেই অর্থ পরম মহত্ব.
The absolute truth is described by the Upanishads and Brahma Sutra, but one must understand the verses as they are. That is the supreme glory and understanding. Purport. It has become fashionable since the time of Shankaracharya to explain everything regarding the Shastras in an indirect way. Scholars take pride in explaining everything in their own way, and they declare that one can understand the Vedic scriptures any way he likes. That any way you like method is foolishness. Wow. And it has created havoc in the Vedic culture. One cannot accept scientific knowledge on his own whimsical way. I'll just stop here a moment. The famous Swami was coming from India to United States. This was in the 70s. And he got off the plane and this wasn't Srila Prabhupada, but just some famous, and he got off the plane and he was interviewed by a reporter from the New York Times. And he said, the reporter asked him, so can you explain what is Hinduism? Then the Swami said, well, how many people are there in India? And the reporter said, I think there's almost 1 billion. I think it's past 1 billion now, isn't it? Yeah, so then the Swami said, well, then there are 1,000,000,001 kinds of Hinduism. That's what he said. Yeah, so any way you like, and it's created havoc in the Vedic culture. In the science of mathematics, for example, 2 + 2 = 4. And one cannot make it equal to 3 or 5. Yet, although it is not possible to alter real knowledge, people have taken to the fashion of understanding Vedic knowledge in any way they like. It is for this reason that we have presented Bhagavad Gita as it is. We do not create meanings by concoction. Sometimes commentators say that the word Kurukshetra in the first verse of Bhagavad Gita refers to one's body. But we do not accept this. That Kshetra, they think Kshetra refers to the body, yeah. We understand that Kurukshetra is a place which still exists. Have anybody been to Kurukshetra? No? You can go.
Yes, I've been there.
You've been, okay. Yes.
Mhm.
Foolish commentators, however, say that Kurukshetra means the body and that Pancha Pandavas refers to the 5 senses. In this way, they distort the meaning and people are misled. Here, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms that all Vedic literature, including the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and others, whether Shruti, Smriti, or Nyaya, must be understood according to their original statements. To describe the direct meaning of the Vedic literatures is glorious, but to describe them in one's own way, using imperfect senses and imperfect knowledge, is a disastrous blunder. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fully deprecated the attempt to describe the Vedas in this way. Regarding the Upanishads, the following 11 Upanishads are considered to be the topmost. Now we're going to have a list of 108 Upanishads here. So we have to keep our ears tuned because these are, it's a long list here. So the top 11, Isha, that's Isha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Karta, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitareya, Chandogya, Brihad Aranyaka, and Shvetasvatara. However, in the Muktikopanishad, verses 30 to 39, there's a description of 108 Upanishads. They are as follows. Ishopanishad, Kenopanishad. See, the first 11 are the same. Katopanishad, Prashnopanishad, Mundakkopanishad, Mandukyopanishad, Taittiriyopanishad, Aitareyopanishad, Chandogyopanishad, Brihad Aranyakopanishad, Brahmopanishad. Would someone like to read the next 10, please?
Should I try?
Yes.
From the 12th one, right?
Yes.
Kaivalyopanishad, Jabalopanishad, Shvetashvataropanishad, Hamsopanishad, Aruneyopanishad, Garbhopanishad, Narayanopanishad, Paramhansopanishad, Amrita Bindupanishad, Nada Bindupanishad, Shirupanishad. Should I stop here?
Or you can do 5 more.
Okay. Shir Upanishad, Atharva Shikhopanishad, Maitrayani Upanishad, Kaushitakyupanishad, Brihad Japal Upanishad, Nrsimhatapani Upanishad, Kalagni Rudra Upanishad, Maitreya Upanishad, Subal Upanishad.
Good. I need another volunteer.
Yes, Prabhu, I can read. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
It's from 30. Kavita Mataji?
31.
Okay, thank you. Shurukshkopanishad, Mantrikopanishad, Sharva Sharupanishad, Niralambopana Upanishad, Shukha Rahasyapanishad, Vajra Shuchikopanishad, Tejo Vindupanishad, Nada Vindupanishad, Dhyana Vindupanishad, Brahma Vidupanishad. Should I stop here, Prabhu?
You can go another 10.
Okay. Yoga Tattvapanishad, Atma Bodhopanishad, Naroda Parivrajak Upanishad, Trishikha Upanishad, Shitopanishad, Yoga Chudamani Upanishad, Nirvana Upanishad, Mandala Brahmana Upanishad, Dakshina Murti Upanishad, Sharabho Upanishad.
Yes. Next volunteer reading.
I can read, Prabhu. Sarabho Upanishad, Skanda Upanishad, Mahanarayana Upanishad, Advaya Tarako Upanishad, Rama Rahasya Upanishad, Rama Tapani Upanishad, Vasudeva Upanishad, Mudgalo Upanishad, Sandilyo Upanishad, Paingalo Upanishad, Bhikshu Upanishad, Mahadupanishad, Sari Rakopanishad, Yoga Shikhopanishad, Turyatitopanishad, Sanyasopanishad, Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Upanishad, Malikopanishad, Avyakto Upanishad, Ekaksharo Upanishad. Somebody else wants to continue?
One more volunteer. Yes.
Purnopanishad, Suryopanishad, Akshayopanishad, Adhyatotmanishad, Kundalikopanishad, Savitri Upanishad, Atmopanishad, Pashupatopanishad, Parama Brahmopanishad, Avadhitopanishad, Tripuratpanopanishad, Divyopanishad, Tripuropanishad, Katha Rudraopanishad, Bhavanopanishad, Hridayopanishad, Yoga Kundalyopanishad, Bhasmopanishad, Rudrakshapanishad, Gunopanishad, Darshanopanishad, Tarasaropanishad, Mahavakyopanishad. Anybody wants to read?
Pancha Brahmanipanishad, Pranagni Hota Upanishad, Gopala Tapano Upanishad, Krishna Upanishad, Yagyavalkya Upanishad, Baraha Upanishad, Satyanyana Upanishad, Hayagriva Upanishad, Dattatreya Upanishad, Garuda Upanishad, Kali Upanishad, Jabali Upanishad, Shobhagyopani Upanishad, Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad, Bhavricha Upanishad, and Muktiko Upanishad. Thus, there are 108 generally accepted Upanishads, of which 11 are the most important, as previously stated. So lots of Upanishads. And we haven't studied many of those Upanishads at all. Sometimes we hear about the Katha Upanishad, or the Kali Santadnu Upanishad, where it says, Iti Sodashakam Namnan Kali Kalmashanashanam. In this age of Kali, these 16 names are specifically recommended to counteract the evil effects of the age of Kali. Okay, so Hare Krishna Bhav. So that we're at time. Anybody have comments, questions, additions, subtractions, corrections, etc.? A lot of Upanishads. Okay.
Which one we had in ISKCON that we regularly? What's the name?
Well, the first one mentioned is Isho. So Sri Isho Upanishad is that beginning one. We have that Sri Isho Upanishad, and interesting in the there's an introduction to the Sri Isho Upanishad, which Srila Prabhupada, which actually was a transcription of an address Srila Prabhupada gave in London. I think it was in Conway Hall when he did a series of lectures there. And in that Upanishad description, Sri Isho Upanishad, introducing it, he talks about, the 4 defects, just like Lord Chaitanya. So he's following exactly Lord Chaitanya's commentary here on all the Upanishads, beginning with Sri Isho Upanishad.
Prabhu, in the past, anybody had read all these Upanishads?
I'm sure. I don't know if they're translated by, there's a Vaishnava translation of many of them. That we're leaving that for you.
Also, Prabhupada
I'm asking
commented
you.
in his purport.
What's that?
Prabhupada commented, used a lot of these Mundaka.
Yes.
In his purport.
He cited them.
Yeah, cited them a lot.
The only one I know that he translated was the Koshisha Upanishad. But of course, the Bhagavad Gita is considered like the cream of all the Upanishads. Therefore, it's called Gita Upanishad, because the knowledge from all these is solidified and purified, is there presented by Lord Krishna in Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvapanishado Gavo, of all the Upanishads, this is the cow, Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna is the milker of the cow, and the person who's going to drink the milk is Arjuna. There's a calf standing nearby. So that's described also. Yes.
So the Upanishads would have predated the Bhagavad Gita, correct? Or
well, as you know, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken previously to the sun god Vivasvan millions of years back, and so it's the same knowledge, but it's being repeated to Arjuna there on the battlefield. But yes, many of these Upanishads were there before Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna.
like, do you know how far before? What the length of time?
According to the Vedas themselves, these Vedic literatures are coming from the breathing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they've been around eternally. So Srila Prabhupada would give the example, like, say, I don't know if you bought a new electronic gadget, a new notebook computer. So along with the computer comes a what do you get along with the computer?
Manual.
The computer manual, yeah. As soon as there's a manual how it works. So similarly, with the creation of this material world, the manual are the Vedas, including Upanishads. Just from the beginning. I see Mr. Krishna Village, also known as Krishna Kirtan. Prabhu has his hand up.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Well, among all the Upanishads, Upanishads are formulas, the sutras, right? So out of all Upanishads, why you think our parampara or Prabhupada actually preferred the Upanishad to present? Does it provide the closest understanding of the Lord, absolute truth, or why?
Well, it's one of the 11 principal Upanishads, and it does focus on in the latter part a lot on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not just many of the Upanishads are describing the difference between the soul and the body, but Sri Upanishad, it in the latter stages of the well, even the middle, all of it, it focuses especially on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he's completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as a complete whole. And even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. Ishavashyamidang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magvidhakasvidhanam. Everything, animate or inanimate, that's within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. Therefore, one should accept only what is there set aside as one's quota, but not take other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So there's a focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead there. I don't know that that's. I've never read anywhere that is the specific reason Prabhupada translated that one only, but it's certainly true.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, because when you're reading the Upanishads, stresses the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, at the same time the personal aspect also. So many people they Mayavadi, suppose primarily they refer probably the impersonal aspect. So is it to be understood that in order to know the absolute truth, one has to study all 108 Upanishads? Just curious, or pick and sorry, because if you study the impersonal aspect which teaches, so you will have conviction that the Lord is impersonal. But if you study the personal, Lord is personal. So I don't know what I'm saying. Is it partial study? Is it dangerous in Upanishad or something? I'm thinking. If you have.
So we understand, and the acharyas teach that the Lord's understanding is both personal and impersonal, both. But of the two, the personal feature is the source of the impersonal. So that's there in Bhagavad Gita. So yes, without studying carefully everything or getting a thorough understanding, one is left with one can be left with the impersonal focus. But getting a fuller understanding, especially from a bona fide teacher, then one understands. Vedanti tattvavidas tattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. There's three aspects of the absolute truth that are known, and the final word is Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Okay, Hare Krishna. I'm going to do another commercial here, just briefly, so that if anybody, this is Srila Prabhupada's 125th birth anniversary, appearance anniversary at the end of the month, and if we're encouraging everyone to write even a few words in praise or in recognition or remembrance of Srila Prabhupada, it's due by August 20th, and you can email it to me, and it'll be printed in our recognition book from the Philadelphia Temple. It's a nice offering. And of course, there's going to be a celebration on that Tuesday. I think it's August, what day? Today is the 11th.
31st.
31st.
Yeah. So please consider that if you want. Even it doesn't have to be long, but actually, not that we're pulling out the heavy artillery, but the GBC, ISKCON's GBC, made a resolution that all devotees, ISKCON devotees, are recommended to write an offering. Did you know that? Oh, okay. So if you'd like, please do so. So the deadline is August 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnugada Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.